One strike, one assassination, and the world changed overnight. Israel just killed one of Iran's most powerful IRGC commanders, and this wasn't just a targeted hit, it was a message, a spark. And now Iran's secret alliances have begun to awaken. What you're about to watch isn't just another headline, it's the beginning of a global chain reaction that could shake every corner of the planet, from the streets of Tehran to the halls of power in Moscow and Beijing. Something is moving, quietly, strategically, and when it fully activates, the entire world will feel it. This is not a regional conflict. This is not just about revenge. This is about power, pressure, and shifting the balance of the global order. Iran is not responding emotionally. It's moving like a grandmaster on a world chessboard. Every move calculated, every alliance ready, every pressure point marked. So if you think you know what's coming next, think again. Because what's about to unfold may not only paralyze global trade and political unity, it may change the course of modern history. Watch till the very end. Don't blink. Don't scroll. Because every second of this story matters. And by the time we reach the conclusion, you'll understand why the world will never be the same again. Iran's strength doesn't just lie in missiles, oil, or speeches. It lies in the shadows. For decades, it has quietly built a network of alliances so vast, so patient, and so loyal that most of the world doesn't even realize how many of today's conflicts are linked by one silent thread: Iran's hand. This isn't about flags or formal treaties. It's about ideology, influence, and resistance. It started right after the Islamic Revolution in 1979, when Iran declared that it would no longer be a puppet of the West. Since then, it has moved with strategic precision to connect with groups who share one thing in common: opposition to Western control, particularly American and Israeli dominance. These aren't random allies. They are handpicked, trained, funded, and embedded like seeds planted in fertile soil. And now, many of those seeds have grown into deeply rooted forces across the region. In Lebanon, Hezbollah doesn't just exist, it thrives as a state within a state. With Iranian funding, training, and weapons, it has become one of the most powerful non-state military actors in the world. In Iraq, Iran's influence runs deep through militias that have now become part of the official security forces. In Yemen, the Houthis have transformed from rebels into power players, backed with Iranian drones and tactics capable of disrupting international shipping lanes and destabilizing entire regions. In Syria, Iran's Quds Force and its network of fighters helped save the Assad regime, gaining strategic corridors and military positioning near Israel's borders. And then there's Palestine, where Iran continues to support groups that reject normalization with Israel and demand full liberation of the land. These relationships aren't transactional. They are built on decades of loyalty, trust, and shared struggle. But Iran's reach doesn't stop at the borders of the Middle East. It has quietly built diplomatic and strategic ties with countries in Africa, Latin America, and even Asia. In Venezuela, it has found a government that shares its anti-Western stance, and through that connection, Iran has tested the waters of influence across the Western Hemisphere. Through religious, political, and economic channels, Iran has built bridges where others saw walls. It has used culture, media, religion, and ideology as tools of connection. And now, when the time calls for it, these connections are no longer dormant. They're ready, activated, coordinated, strategic. What makes this network so powerful isn't just the firepower, it's the unpredictability. Iran can strike without showing its hand. It can destabilize without stepping on the battlefield. It can pressure its enemies from 10 different angles at once without ever being directly blamed. That's the brilliance of the shadow network. It gives Iran global reach without global war. It gives it power without exposing weakness. And in today's tense environment, where a single drone strike or assassination can light a regional fire, this quiet empire of alliances may soon rise from the shadows and change everything. Iran doesn't move like a superpower chasing headlines. It moves like a grandmaster playing chess in the dark. Where others act with loud, reckless energy, Iran prefers silence, strategy, and timing. That's why its most dangerous moves are never seen coming until it's too late. The true strength of Iran's influence isn't in how loud it shouts, but in how quietly it builds. For years, its allies, militias, and strategic assets have waited in the background, not dormant, but disciplined. They don't act without purpose. They don't respond to every insult or provocation, because Iran doesn't use its proxies impulsively. It activates them when the world least expects it, when the timing causes maximum impact and minimum backlash. That's the doctrine of strategic patience. Iran is willing to wait months, even years, to make a single move that flips the board, whether it's arming the Houthis with drone technology or embedding its forces in Syria under the cover of counterterrorism. Every step has been part of a broader plan. These alliances aren't just alliances, they're pieces of a coordinated machine designed to be triggered like a wave. Iran trains them, funds them, and gives them ideological alignment. But it also gives them discipline. When Tehran gives the signal, the reaction comes not from one place, but from everywhere at once. Rockets from Lebanon, drones from Yemen, cyber attacks on oil infrastructure, riots in the streets of Baghdad, naval disruption in the Strait of Hormuz. It's not chaos, it's orchestration. When Iran activates its allies, the world doesn't just see violence, it sees confusion. Who fired first? Was it a rebel group or a national army? Was it retaliation or provocation? That fog of war is exactly what Iran uses to its advantage. It moves through gray zones, areas where accountability is blurred and consequences are delayed. This gives it plausible deniability while still striking fear and pressure into its adversary. When the U.S. base is bombed in Iraq or a Saudi oil refinery is hit, the world hesitates to point directly at Tehran. And that hesitation, that moment of uncertainty, is Iran's real battlefield. Because while the world debates, Iran moves again. In today's geopolitical climate, this method of activation has become more relevant than ever. With global powers distracted by elections, wars in other regions, and economic instability, Iran senses the opening it's waited for, the moment when the world's attention is fractured just enough for its network to rise and strike in sync. This isn't guesswork. This is how Iran has always operated, with patience, precision, and a readiness to act when the world is unprepared. And now, as tensions rise and pressure mounts, the quiet code may have already been sent. Allies who've waited in silence are beginning to speak with weapons. Messages once passed in shadows are becoming movements on maps. Iran didn't build this network to sit still forever. It built it for a moment just like this, when silence ends and every move shocks the world. When Iran activates its network of allies, the effects ripple far beyond the battlefield. This isn't just a military reaction, it's a multi-front offensive designed to pressure, distract, and destabilize. Iran understands that modern warfare is not just about tanks and missiles, It's about economic stress, political division, cyber sabotage, and psychological warfare. Every ally, every proxy, every partner plays a role in applying pressure not just on Israel or the United States, but on global systems that hold the modern world together. Iran's alliances are positioned like pressure points on the body of the international order. When pressed, they don't just cause discomfort. They cause disruption that spreads into supply chains, oil markets, and the hearts of financial capitals across the globe. Hezbollah in Lebanon can ignite northern Israel with thousands of rockets, forcing Israel to divide its military focus and resources. At the same time, militias in Iraq have the ability to attack American bases and convoys, putting U.S. personnel at risk and destabilizing Baghdad's fragile government. Meanwhile, the Houthis in Yemen have already shown their reach by launching drone strikes deep into Saudi oil fields and targeting commercial shipping in the Red Sea. These aren't isolated actions, they're coordinated threats, and when they all activate in a tight time frame, it overwhelms any single military response. Israel cannot handle a northern front with Hezbollah, a southern front with Gaza, and cyber attacks or long-range drones all at once. The United States cannot defend every base, every ship, and every digital system stretched across multiple continents. Iran uses this pressure to create space for negotiation, space for revenge, and space to reassert its dominance in a region full of rivals. But more than that, it creates global uncertainty. Oil prices spike, stock markets shake, investors panic, governments redirect focus. Suddenly, what looked like a regional conflict becomes a global crisis. Shipping routes like the Strait of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb come under threat, affecting the flow of oil and goods to Europe and Asia. Energy security becomes fragile. Insurance premiums on cargo skyrocket. Airlines reroute. Trade slows, and all of this costs the global economy billions. Even if no full-scale war breaks out. This is Iran's multi-fronted genius. It doesn't need to defeat the West militarily. It only needs to raise the cost of confrontation so high that global leaders pause, hesitate, or break ranks. That hesitation creates division among allies, weakens political resolve, and increases public pressure to seek de-escalation. Iran has studied how wars are fought in the 21st century. It knows that images of chaos travel faster than diplomacy, that fear spreads faster than facts, and that when a storm comes from 5 directions at once, even the strongest powers struggle to find shelter. What Iran is unleashing through its alliances isn't just military, it's psychological and systemic. A shock to the rhythm of global control, a reminder that no one fights on one front anymore. And the next global conflict won't start with a declaration of war. It will start with 100 little fires all burning at the same time. Iran's allies aren't just positioned to fight, they're positioned to choke. In a world driven by trade, oil, and global shipping, Iran understands that controlling the movement of goods is just as powerful as firing a missile. That's why its strategy extends far beyond borders and battlefields. It reaches into the very arteries of global commerce, and its proxies are stationed like silent sentinels at the most vital choke points on Earth. The Houthis in Yemen, once underestimated as desert rebels, now sit like guardians at the mouth of the Red Sea. They don't need a navy to create havoc. With a handful of drones and short-range missiles, they've already forced global cargo giants to reroute, disrupted shipping lanes, and spiked global freight insurance overnight. Every cargo ship that slows down or turns back sends ripples through economies thousands of miles away. And Iran doesn't need to fire a single shot to make it happen. They let their allies deliver the message. In the north, Hezbollah looms over the Mediterranean trade routes and Israel's ports with long-range precision weapons and vast tunnel networks. They can close the skies and threaten the seas. In Iraq, Iranian-backed militias sit near vital oil fields and supply routes that feed not just local economies, but global energy flows. They have the ability to sabotage pipelines, ambush convoys, or disrupt production with a single coordinated strike. In the Gulf, near the Strait of Hormuz, through which a fifth of the world's oil passes, Iranian naval forces and their allies have repeatedly shown they can harass or even seize vessels, all under the cover of deniability. These are not acts of random aggression. They are strategic pressure points. Each move is designed to create economic panic without full-blown war. Because in today's world, slowing trade is the new siege warfare. Cut the supply of oil to Europe or Asia for just a week and markets shudder. Interrupt the flow of goods through the Suez Canal, and entire industry stall. Iran knows that the world's most powerful nations are also the most economically vulnerable. They depend on steady, uninterrupted flows of oil, food, raw materials, and consumer goods. By positioning its proxies to threaten these flows, Iran doesn't need to destroy, it only needs to delay. The fear of disruption is sometimes more effective than disruption itself. Shipping companies reroute to avoid danger, governments raise alerts, prices surge, and the global population feels the pressure at the pump and in the market. This isn't just warfare, it's leverage. Iran doesn't just fight back when attacked, it strangles slowly and forces the world to look not at Tehran, but at the chaos around it. And in that chaos, Iran hides its strength in plain sight. It doesn't need to dominate every battle. It only needs to control the consequences of movement. And when every major shipping route is under threat from a different direction, the message becomes clear. Trade routes are the veins of modern civilization. And Iran now has its fingers on the pulse. Iran is not just watching the Middle East, it's watching the world. And what it sees is a fractured West, distracted and divided. The United States is embroiled in political turmoil, with deep divisions over foreign policy, military spending, and international priorities. Europe is wrestling with economic instability, protests, rising populism, and conflicting interests across the continent. This global disunity is not just a coincidence to Iran, it's an opportunity. When great powers are divided, smaller but focused nations move with greater confidence. Iran sees that now is the time to act, not because it is the strongest, but because its adversaries are unsure of themselves. When the United States hesitates to respond or Europe debates over sanctions, Iran advances. It is not reckless, it is calculating. It understands that hesitation in the West is a green light in the East. The Western world is currently fighting battles on many fronts: Ukraine, inflation, internal politics, and a rising distrust in leadership. This overload creates blind spots. Iran knows that when a nation's attention is scattered, its ability to respond swiftly is weakened. So it doesn't need to win a conventional war, it needs to move while its enemies are arguing over how to react. Public fatigue over endless wars and military commitments abroad is another key factor. Iran senses that the people in the West are tired of foreign entanglements. They question the value of sending troops or funding conflicts overseas. Iran plays into this sentiment by keeping its actions indirect, low scale, and difficult to justify a large-scale Western response. Proxy attacks, cyber strikes, and oil disruptions can cause real damage without crossing the red lines that demand full-blown retaliation. Iran also leverages global media fragmentation. In a time when narratives are manipulated and truth is filtered through algorithms, Iran knows that controlling the story is almost as important as controlling the battlefield. It uses confusion to its advantage. If Western nations can't even agree on who was behind an attack, they can't agree on how to respond. This division within governments, within parliaments, and even within the populations of Western countries delays action and weakens resolve. Iran understands that war is no longer just fought with weapons, it's fought with public opinion, with media influence, and with psychological pressure. This moment in history, with the West turning inward and questioning its role on the global stage, is precisely the type of environment in which Iran's long game becomes most dangerous. It doesn't have to fire the first shot or raise the first flag. It simply has to move when the world is unsteady. That unsteadiness becomes its cover. That distraction becomes its weapon. And in that silence of indecision, Iran speaks through its proxies, through disruption, through sudden waves of chaos that catch the world off guard. When power is distracted, resistance becomes bold. And right now, Iran's eyes are wide open, watching the cracks in the West, preparing to step through them while no one is looking. Iran's strategy doesn't operate in isolation. It moves in rhythm with the new global order, and that includes powerful allies who share its vision of a multipolar world where the West no longer holds unchallenged dominance. This sixth key point isn't about Iran standing alone. It's about Iran aligning itself with rising giants like Russia and China, who also seek to rewrite the rules of global power. These aren't shallow diplomatic handshakes. These are calculated partnerships built on common interests, shared enemies, and mutual benefit. Iran, Russia, and China each represent different strengths: military resilience, energy influence, and economic reach. Together, they create a strategic triangle that is slowly tilting the global balance away from Western control. Russia and Iran have already shown coordination on the ground in Syria, where they work together to defend Bashar al-Assad's regime and shift regional power away from Western-backed forces. In doing so, they created a battlefield alliance that blended air power, intelligence sharing, and coordinated militia support. But the cooperation doesn't stop there. Russia continues to provide Iran with advanced defense systems like the S-300, and now potentially more advanced technology, while Iran supplies drones and combat expertise that Moscow has even used in Ukraine. These mutual exchanges strengthen both sides, not just technically, but politically. It sends a message to the world that the days of isolating nations through sanctions are coming to an end. When the West closes one door, Iran opens another in the East. Then there's China, whose Belt and Road Initiative passes straight through Iran's geography. Beijing doesn't want Iran to fall. It wants it stable and useful. It needs Iran's oil, its markets, and most of all, its location. In return, China offers Iran trade deals, investments, and a pathway into global economic systems that bypass Western sanctions. The recent 25-year cooperation deal between Iran and China is more than paperwork. It's a roadmap for long-term collaboration in energy, infrastructure, and intelligence. And when it comes to international institutions, China and Russia regularly shield Iran at the UN Security Council, preventing unified Western action. This protective umbrella gives Iran the confidence to act without fear of immediate global backlash. This alignment with major powers also plays out in cyber warfare, intelligence sharing, and even space and defense technology. As U.S. influence contracts or becomes entangled in multiple conflicts, Iran's network grows stronger, not just through militias and proxies, but through embassies, banks, and cables connecting Tehran to Moscow and Beijing. Iran is no longer the isolated rogue state it once appeared to be. It is now part of a broader challenge to Western dominance, where alliances aren't based on ideology, but on shared resistance to U.S. hegemony. That's why Iran's next move will not just be an Iranian move. It will echo through Russian and Chinese corridors of power. The global consequences of an Iranian activation are no longer local. They're international, systemic, and deeply coordinated, with players that have the ability to paralyze the global order in ways that bullets and bombs alone never could. So now the pieces are on the board. Iran didn't